Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. We're here today to discuss inclusivity and diversity in surgery and how we move forward and we launch our ACEs network. So it's fair to say in today's society that the people should be celebrated for the differences and the rich diversity that this brings. People are increasingly speaking up and standing up for bad behaviours that leave individuals or minorities feeling left out, targeted, disempowered, or lacking opportunity. And this is very topical at the moment, particularly in the fields of sport, such as cricket, but also even in the boardrooms of the FTSE 100 companies. And I think we in the NHS have to reflect on our culture, and particularly in one of the toughest environments in the NHS, in the field of surgery. Do we support people to succeed in the workplace, or are we all falling behind a stereotype which makes it hard for anyone different to survive? Um, I'd like to introduce my panel, um, who are going to be with me to talk about the opportunities and the difficulties that sometimes are faced in surgery. I'm going to start with Simon Dennis, my colleague who's an ENT surgeon in Salisbury. Simon brings to the table a rich experience in the education forum. He's passionate about training, and he was our ENT training director for 5 years, and then head of School of Surgery, and more recently an interim associate dean. Vicky is our only non-surgeon, but being the divisional governance manager for surgery, I think she knows more about surgeons than probably surgeons know about themselves. Um, she also has a long-term disability and co-chairs the long-term illness and disability staff network. And it's fair to say that I don't think surgeons really talk enough about their challenges, particularly when they do face disabilities. Emmanuel is a colleague of mine. Emmanuel Toby is a colleague of mine who's a general surgeon at Hampshire Hospitals. And he came to the UK in 1995, having qualified in Nigeria. Um, that's about the same time as me. And I would be really interested to hear about your experiences and your opportunities. Um, I were very impressed to say that you have actually managed to gain an MBA and an MD along your journey, which is very impressive. And I can see that you have got keen interests in the field of management and leadership in clinical practice. John Knight is a colleague of mine in Southampton who's a colorectal surgeon. He has extensive previous experience in surgical training as an education and clinical supervisor. He's also been the Royal College Surgeon's surgical tutor for Southampton and more recently the training programme director for core surgery in Wessex. He's also the clinical lead for the surgical care group, so he has an oversight of the general surgical practice on the shop floor. Siba did her initial training in the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which I know is a very impressive, prestigious place in New Delhi. And she married and actually made a decision. She had to give up her career for some time to support her husband. She then made a very brave decision to move to the UK with a 3-year-old son and restart her surgical career as a single mum in a new country. And that journey's not been easy, but I've had the privilege of working with Siba in Oxford, and I was absolutely awestruck by the determination and ambition she had for both her and her son. And not surprisingly, her gritty determination has ensured that she's reached the heights of her specialty and also that she's produced a wonderful son who has the same strength of character as Siba. And last but not least, we have the voice of youth. Callum is a law graduate and a foundation doctor in Northwest London. They are a founder of the ACEs network alongside myself and Hasna. Callum's a deputy editor in chief and the LGBTQ plus lead of the British Student Doctor Journal and a former Clegg Scholar for the BMJ, and also produced significant LGBTQ content and recently chaired the RSM COVID-19 series webinar and healthcare in the pandemic. It's fair to say I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about Callum in the future as their career progresses. So I just wanted to start by saying the Kennedy report was recently brought out, which really sort of shone light on the Royal College of Surgeons. It was requested from the president a detailed look at really, does this institution represent surgeons, the rich diversity of surgeons for today? And really, the report, I must say, I felt was quite damning at the fact that we haven't really moved with the times. The surgeons of today are not the surgeons of yesterday. We have a huge diversity of people within the field of surgery, and perhaps they're not represented in today's group. And that's why we have to think about what alternative support, what alternative things we have to do to change the organisation and ensure that people of all diversity are managed and supported. So I'm going to start opening with a few questions, and I'd like to ask, first of all, Emmanuel, you came to the UK having trained overseas, and what has this meant? How has it been for your career? Do you think it's been harder than for someone who was trained here? Um, what do you feel?
Thanks, Sandra, and good morning, everyone. Um, I would say definitely, without a doubt, that the journey for someone who trains overseas, especially in a competitive field like surgery, in this country, it's challenging. Just to reassure everybody, I do not think that the United Kingdom is alone in this regard. It's a universal problem. I have colleagues who work in Canada, who work in the US, and they report the same type of thing. Um, Coming to the UK, what we from overseas, the challenges we encounter are multiple. So first of all, you have to be contending with getting your immigration issues, and believe it or not, it changes like as you have the number of seasons in a year. So every year, all the laws say, you know, when I started off, you had a 4 year permit-free period. And once you pass your PLAB, which is a professional exam, you were meant to have 4 years to allow you to apply for jobs. But during my own career, within a year, these laws changed. So first of all, you're trying to grapple with the ever-changing immigration laws, and then you then couple that with a very competitive career choice or career that you want to pursue. And I remember after completing, towards the end of my 3 year basic surgery training in Wessex, I went to one of the professors at the time and to tell them that I was interested in research because I knew that research jobs were available. And I was categorically told that it's not for people like you. And I was quite staggered. I mean, it wasn't, the message wasn't, it wasn't quoted. I was listening, it's not for people like me. So I started asking myself, what do I look like? What are people like me like? And what people like me say. And it wasn't once. Um, Not too long after that, research jobs were advertised in another department in the hospital, and I went to talk to them to say, look, I'm interested. How do I apply for this? And I was again categorically told that I shouldn't bother. That it wasn't for people like me. By a different person this time. So these are the things. There is institutional bias. There is unconscious bias. And we just have to be aware that these things exist. I will also admit that steps are being taken to change it, to make it more inclusive, but there's still a long way to travel, and that's my story. The application process is not totally blind. You understand? The application process, um, no matter how it's formatted, you can still identify people from overseas or people from a background that's different from yours, and I would say we all unconsciously, will tend to uh, uh, gravitate towards things we know, people we know, things that make us feel comfortable. So you gravitate towards institutions. You gravitate towards experiences that reflect your own experience. We just have to be conscious of it. And I'll
I
stop there because
No, I think you're absolutely right, Emmanuel. I was thinking hard about this last night about that unconscious bias. And maybe you see yourself as a person who's been successful, identify people in your group and think that that's what good looks like or that's what success looks like. And maybe we need more of the same because that's the path. And that absolutely is where we would really hope that we can challenge ourselves and just raise awareness of that unconscious bias. I just want to bring in bring in Seba. Siba, do you feel that there's been a ceiling for your career progression, and who put it there if there was?
Um, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I had several things which happened to me, and um, I agree with Emmanuel about coming from abroad with a degree, and I was automatically told that I will become a staff grade. Nobody actually looked at me and said, "Is that what she wants to do?" or is she capable of doing it? And having said that, things have changed over the last 20 years. But I do have a different thing which I want to talk about. The fact that I haven't seen anybody like me in surgical training, like a single parent with no family coming from abroad. I think that is that I don't think I'm ever going to see anybody like me ever. But even if you take everything away, single parent in surgical training, you won't find any because automatically there is a bias saying you are not going to make it and people just opt out. And I think that is something for people to be aware that it is not easy. Like, I wanted to write some papers. I couldn't. I was moving home. I had no money, no visa, nobody to look after my child. Um, it was difficult. My son has been in 10 schools. I moved about 23 houses, 4 countries, 30 houses. I was really motivated, and people will lose heart. So, what I would say is that being aware, and if I had a true mentor who sat with me and once in a while asked me, Siba, are you okay? Are you managing? Are you being a bit kind to yourself? I think I would have done better. I think that is a lack of awareness. People around me knew what was happening, but I think nobody wanted to get involved. Or I don't know what it was. I just wanted a kind word, a hug, a little bit of help in. And I think I wouldn't have taken 15 years to get where I am, or 20 years to get where I am. I did make it, but I did make it because, all I did was just this and then look after my son. So there's chunks of life I just dedicated to being in the hospital, come back, look after my son, go back to work, come back, look after my son. And the fact that I was 24/7 responsible for my son, it's almost like a hamster on the wheel. And now the problem I have is that I can come off the wheel, but I want to go back onto it because I don't know anything else.
Thank
And I'm looking for something to do more and more, trying to prove to myself that I am good. I can make it.
Well, Seba, I
And
think you've well and truly proven that. But I'd also say that, the Royal College is actually saying they want people like yourself. They want inspiration because actually you are a success story, a fantastic success story for all those single parents. But also we need to know what were the barriers, why it was so difficult and what could have been put in place. I don't know, has anyone got any other thoughts about that, reflecting on what both Emmanuel and Seba has said?
Yeah, I think we make an assumption that the training pathway for everyone is the same, and that means it's neutral. But the reality is it's not. The training pathway for surgical training pushes people aside. So when you look at how someone becomes a surgeon, it's, I'm obviously still at the beginning, so I'm thinking about medical school and core training. When you look at medical students, some people arrive knowing how to talk the talk, how to walk the walk, how to fit in, who to ask, where to go. And they've, that sort of social currency. A lot of people don't have that. But only about 6% of medical students come from working class backgrounds. So they've arrived at a disadvantage. And I went through the surgical core training criteria recently. I had a look at that self-assessment form, the points-based system. By my maths, roughly 50 of the 72 points are more easily achievable if you either have money or a background which sort of lends you an advantage. So you're stopping a whole swathe of people. And what we need to examine is who is setting that criteria? What are their biases? Why are we okay with the outcomes from that criteria when we know it doesn't create diversity, which is a positive for both our own performances, the performances of around us, and for patients?
John.
Yeah, I just wanted to absolutely a couple of points picking up on what Siba said. Surgeons of today are different, and for them, work-life balance is important, and that means we've got trainees who are young parents who've got other commitments outside of medicine, and we have many more trainees who are on less than full-time training, and I think sometimes the training programs struggle to get that balance right to give the same opportunities to those who are on the full-time training. And so the other point I wanted to make was if we look at somewhere like Southampton that has a mixed population of trainees, we have both the deanery trainees, such as the core trainees who are coming along the deanery program, and then we've got our trust fellows who are working for the trust. If you look at the split, it's very clear that many more overseas doctors are doing the trust jobs compared to the deanery ones. So there's an imbalance in opportunity there, and even within the trust, are we offering the same opportunities for both the deanery trainees and the trust fellows? And I think there's certainly room for improvement there.
Thank you both Callum and John for those really, really insightful comments. I have to say that I came to a Russell Group University as one of the only Northerners from a working class background. And it was a bit intimidating, but I would say that I had a full scholarship. So I didn't come with the worries that I was going to cripple myself or my family. And I think that that is really a big thing that people really have to think about now. So I do feel that that's probably a further problem. I just thought in terms of just in terms of moving on from the actual, you coming to this country, maybe from an overseas training perspective, the GMC's done quite a bit of work on this, and so their conclusion was that actually, even if those barriers of opportunity had not been put in place by people around them, they didn't perform as well in certain assessments, in exams. And I want to ask Simon, in his role within the deanery and the School of Surgery, what is his thoughts about that, and what is now being done?
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Emmanuel and Siba, for your stories. Very inspirational for me. The GMC did some work on differential attainment some years ago, which looked at, as you say, outcomes in ARCPs, an outcome in professional exams amongst trainees, both across all specialities. And what they found was that there was a differential in attainment, and there were some differences between in the BME trainees who had their primary medical qualification from the UK and white trainees. But it wasn't across all specialities. And interestingly, surgery, there wasn't much difference. But there was quite a big difference in trainees who had come from the European Economic Area and also international medical graduates. In fact, slightly with the international medical graduates having the lowest attainment. And This was prompted at some research by a lady called Catherine Wilf from UCL, who looked into it in much greater detail. And the causes of this differential attainment were multifactorial. But one thing I took home really from going to a lot of presentations and workshops on it was that it's very easy to say that it was related to differences in language, and that was almost a cop-out for people to say it's because their language isn't as good as people who've trained in the UK. But actually it's more to do with the relationships that develop in the workplace, as Emmanuel alluded to, between particularly senior leaders in the NHS and the relationships they have with trainees from a different background or from overseas. And I think one of the things we shared that information across the deanery, and one of the things we looked at was how we make people aware of it and how we improve the data and the results. And we talked about improving those relationships. And one of the things we talk about is stealing, which is whereby a senior takes a trainee under their wing and gives them support, but puts them in an opportunity where they can develop their skills, but in a supported way. And then that builds not only a relationship between the trainer and the trainee, but also gives that trainee confidence. So that was one area. And another area was setting up fellowships for international medical graduates to look at how we improve the induction for international medical graduates, and particularly looking at how we support them with exams. And certainly in Wessex Deanery, we have a professional support unit that helps trainees who are struggling with exams and gives them educational psychology support for that process. So a lot of it is actually enhancing the support that you give people coming from overseas, and recognizing that they don't have the protective mechanisms that the support mechanisms that Siba alluded to. A simple way of looking at it is if there are plenty of single parents with children who are trying to pursue a career in the UK who have their primary medical qualification from the UK, but they would have more family support available to them than Siba would have had. So it is important to be aware of that, and to be also become more interested in the individual, the trainee that is joining your firm, learn more about them, learn more about their culture, and establish a relationship, because that will really help boost their confidence and help boost their performance in exams at a later date.
Thanks, Simon. That's really helpful, and it really does show that the work is being done. And perhaps if these opportunities and support had been available for both Emmanuel and Siba, things wouldn't have been as hard to start with. Listening to you around sort of just getting to know your team, and getting to know people, and what are they bringing to work that day, how hard has it been to get there. I think as busy surgeons, it can be very quick, or very easy for us to fall into, we got to get to theatre or we've got to get to clinic, and not much in between. And that sort of time for that chat might be considered a luxury, but actually I think it's essential. And I think we all agree that we do need to know each other a bit more, and the wider team. So I want to bring in Vicky here. So, as you know, surgery isn't about the individual surgeon, but it's the whole team. And many of us have found ourselves in tense situations in the presence of surgeons who've been quite frankly terrifying. So no one's really felt the ability to speak or change anything. And I want to ask, do you think that surgeons have a reputation of being hard to communicate with, or possibly a bit less considerate to the wider team? And I'm asking you particularly because you do head the governance, and you do know about communication breakdowns and issues that go along, because you have to report on them.
Yes, so thank you for having me. So I'm a governance manager, and if people don't know what that means, in essence, I look at things that are reported, incidents that are reported, and why they've happened. And in most part, we look at things that have caused serious harm to patients. And a number of things that I've been doing this role for 2 years, and during that time, you know, I've been involved in a number of investigations and a number in theatres, because I cover theatres as well as surgery. And in the most part, the root causes of those incidents relate to human factors, communication, and people not feeling that they can speak up in the theatre environment. And it's obviously not the case in all incidents, because the number that we look at is something ridiculous, like 0.005% of surgeries that take place. But these serious things do happen. So for me, I think from the outside, because I'm not a surgeon, there can be times where not the whole theatre team don't feel they can talk or speak up. That's not the case with all surgeons. Obviously, we do have teams that are very effective and have excellent outcomes for their patients, but there are times that it doesn't work. So part of my role is to figure out how we change that. And the other part of my role at UHS is chair of the Long-Term Illness and Disability Staff Network. And, you know, I'm involved in a lot of the inclusivity stuff that happens at UHS. And, you know, human factors is a massive part of everything that we do. And most surgeons and doctors are brilliant with, you know, how they communicate with patients. That needs to be all, you know, in most translated to all of their communication, and involving and getting to know the people that you work with, I think is, you know, taking that time is really, really important, because it benefits the patient in the end.
Thank you, Vicky. Has anyone else got any thoughts about that? Do you feel we really do think about others, and are we kind in how we go about our work?
Andrea, I was going to say, I think it's really important, if you think about surgeons and, say, for example, the theatre environment where we are leading the team. It's really important to set that scene, and the opportunity is there now with the WHO checklist when we all introduce ourselves, and that is a really important part of the day, in terms of, you know, using first name terms where we're meeting everybody, making sure everybody knows who they are, and making sure that everybody feels able to contribute to the day. So that's a really important aspect, that as surgeons, because we are sort of leading that, where people look at that we must take that seriously.
Thank you. That's really important. Callum, did you have any thoughts, being fresh to it all?
I do feel like we're sidestepping around a little bit. We know the perception of surgery amongst medical students and junior doctors. We're all aware of this. We know that there's more bullying of people from minority backgrounds than of white surgical trainees. We know that 70% of queer trainees have reported harassment at work, and only a quarter feel comfortable to report it. And we also know that disabled people are amongst the most discriminated in the NHS. So why are we not examining these enough and directly getting the evidence for these? I've been researching into the experiences of queer surgeons and disabled surgeons, and there is so little out there. We need to start saying, okay, we're taking our WHO checklist. That's a really good step forwards. We've got the Royal College. They've done their independent commission. That's, again, a really positive thing that's happened. And we need to take that momentum and carry on looking into these dark corners and saying, well, actually, how are we going to improve this for everyone?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the question is how we take it forward. And you know, maybe there is a bit of, we've normalized some of this activity. We've normalized that expectation that people will not call us by our first name, yet we can call everyone else in the theatre by their first name. And, you know, call ourselves out about it. And again, it's that unconscious bias. But Callum, how do you propose, you know, the Royal College of Surgeons, that Kennedy report gave us a lot of information about how people really are disadvantaged. they talked about the fact within 2 terms of office, we want to see a more diverse group of people representing us. But how do we actually go about that on the shop floor? Does anyone have any ideas?
So I don't mind to jump in first and then let someone else speak for a change. But I think the first thing we have to do is get these people in the room. We can't start talking for communities. We need to start speaking with communities. And although I'm biased, I think that's something which, for example, the ACES network could help with, because we can get a group of people from a lot of diverse and minority backgrounds. We can help support them to get their voices heard. And we can then work with those sort of high senior positions and say, look, this is what we need to get done. This is what people are saying. This is what the information is coming from. Because there's a lot of diversity in sort of in the low levels of the pyramid. But as you start getting further and further up, it gets very white and it gets very male very fast.
Have any of my male white colleagues got anything to say about that in terms of, do they perceive around them that there is difference and diversity? Or is it just that we've all just stopped looking, or we've stopped thinking about it?
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks, Callum. I'm acutely aware that I am just about to turn 50, white, male, and relatively senior in the NHS now. And I'm also aware that, in the generation above me, there are still some attitudes that are not really acceptable in this day and age. And I've observed, throughout my time in the NHS, a cultural shift. And I'm by no means perfect, far from it, and I'm always being picked up by my children for not using the correct language, and I've been educated by them. I think, how do we bring about change? I think you've got to start with, probably at selection for medical school, Callum, because there's a limit to how diverse you can make a group when they're selected, at medical school, and that's not particularly diverse, as you alluded to, that selection process. As you've got to start there. And also, I think in terms of attitudes to bullying and racism and sexism in the workplace have to be taught during the training schemes. It's really important that includes training, both at medical school and in postgraduate training. I think the area that we're probably not so good at is addressing attitudes amongst senior consultants in the NHS, and how you deal with that. And I've witnessed a number of situations during my career where it's not been managed well, and I think that's a big area. And I sometimes, I personally don't have a blueprint of how we go ahead with that, but I think that ally training is an important part of that, and finding people who are senior in the NHS to sort of stop that unwanted behaviour, and to do it subtly and do it every day, rather than just running a course on equality and diversity and hoping that's going to change things. Is probably not going to work. So it's a case of getting allies in the workplace and picking up on language that encourages
I think
intolerance.
Thanks, Simon. That is really helpful, and I think in terms of there's got to be consequences. It can't be, oh yes, that surgeon just did that. HR has got to be involved in, holding people to account for the conversations that they have and for the language that they use. Because if people feel they're untouchable, then actually they carry on, or there's a bit of kind of, oh, well, that's them, don't worry. And that's not acceptable. I'm just just looking at the chat, I had it on Slido and I couldn't see anyone, but I can see that Christine, you're trying to get a question over, and your question is regarding the promotion of ethnic minorities in medical management roles. You feel that why is it that we find there are very few ethnic minorities, disabled, or LGBTQI consultants in management roles? Can anyone answer that one? Vicky, perhaps being in management, what do you feel?
It's a really difficult one to answer because I don't know. I mean, Callum's already alluded to some of it, isn't it? Hasn't he? You know, there are those barriers, there are those biases, and people will, in the most part, recruit people that are like themselves, unconsciously doing it. I've had those experiences throughout my life, and it's not been easy for me to get to the position that I'm in now, because you know I'm unprofessional for particular reasons. I can't make somebody a cup of tea. You get silly comments. You then don't get the same attention in terms of education and training because people think you're not capable of doing it, or oh, Vicky doesn't want to worry about that, she's got enough going on, but nobody actually asks you. So I've been, I don't want to say lucky, but I've had to work hard. I've had some very supportive people around me, particularly at UHS, that have helped me, but not everybody has those same experiences. I think Emmanuel already said, you know, the recruitment process isn't blind. It's not. It's you can identify where people come from the training that they've done. You can identify, you know, various things from different parts of the application process. And actually, if you're disabled, there's a scheme where you can say that I can't remember the name of it, but you tick to say if you meet the minimum criteria, you are guaranteed an interview. And I never tick that because I don't want to be given an interview just because I'm disabled. I want to be given an interview because I'm good enough. And that's what most people want as well. I don't know the answers, but I think, you know, what Simon has said around allyship, tackling it, questioning it, being out there and people knowing who you are and actually it's not acceptable anymore. I think that is the way forward from my perspective anyway. And I'm out there and I irritate people all the time, but I'm fine with that.
I think Vicky said something really important when she said the word professionalism, because actually, when we're talking about what a surgeon looks like, is this professionalism or is this just the language of discrimination dressed up in power? Is it just your biases of what you want your colleagues to look like? Because I think that's what we end up seeing quite a lot filtered down. And it's about actually saying a surgeon can look however that surgeon wants within the confines of our specialty, and not limiting, not gatekeeping who gets access to become one.
Do you know, it's funny, I'll leave you a little comment that when I was a medical student, I came to work once in trousers, and the consultant at the end of the day took me aside and said, actually, I'm just giving you some advice. That's not what the public expect of you as a woman. And you know, it's amazing. I mean, I have to say we have moved on, but we're not far enough. Absolutely. And
I mean, I was called a slur for wearing a rainbow lanyard in an operating theatre, so I'm not convinced we've fully moved on.
right. Yeah, no, well, we've got a long way to go. That's absolutely sure. And I'm just going to pick up on Josh's comments. He completely agrees with you, Callum. He said some seriously uncomfortable work needs to be done by the college to be transparent and expose the barriers to culture that exist. Being nicer is a step, but it's one on a long ladder of problems. And he said, I'm a huge advocate of tackling unconscious bias. It's a big part of his work, but we've got to stop pretending that this is all unconscious. What do you feel about that? Any comments about that?
I think it's really difficult, you know, to tackle that because you know, I've been through recruitment processes where it's clear I'm never going to get that job in a million years, and then you get sort of throwaway feedback at the end, you know, when you're unsuccessful. But how can you turn around somebody and say, is it because I've got a disability that you've not employed me? Because they will always say, oh, absolutely not. So it's really, and it's, you know, it would be the same with any of the protected characteristics. How you ask that question is very difficult, and how you change that is very difficult. I don't have the answer, but
I'm not sure any of us have the answer, but between us, do you think we can forge a way forward? That's the question. And can we just, accept that this is not tokenism? We really actually do need to, first of all, it starts with just understanding each other more and having ability to do that. But then actually calling out those behaviors that we see around us and not just standing there and allowing them to happen. And then exploring how people really can be supported. And I think that it is really hard that, when you're really busy, we don't have time, but really we have to make time, don't we? If we really want people to feel truly valued within our organization and to truly maximize the huge potential they have, we do have to make that time. I don't know whether anyone else has any thoughts about what actions we take from this. We've got 5 minutes left.
Can, can I put a recommendation I have there? These kind of issues, when you get managers and you assess their performances over a year or over whatever time, you don't assess their performances on how well do they manage inclusivity. You don't assess their performance on diversity. You assess their performance on other parameters. And one way of, like Callum said, I try to make, to be understanding of people, and I don't really like doing the accusing this or that. You don't know what you do not know. You understand? If issues like this exist, they're not issues you're used to. They're not everyday commonplace to you. You don't understand other people's situation. So one way of helping is to let people know that these things, there are people that are different from us, that are around us, and what are we doing to bring them in? And your performance as a manager or as a leader will be based on not just other parameters, but not just economic parameters, but on your people's parameters as well.
Hi, Andrea. I just wanted to say that I think we're looking at the current cohort of junior doctors. I think if you need really grassroots change, you need to go back to schools. People like Callum, Vicky, and myself need to go back and say, you could be all of this, but you still can make it. Because I think there is a dropout at the school level where they think they can't make it. I think that's where it needs to change. I think probably if we do that, then I think over the next 4 or 5 years or 6 years, they'll think they can do it. If I did it, I think anybody can make it. And that's the message need to go back. And I think that need to go back to school. That's what I feel.
There was a very interesting study which was done in America, actually, which looked at the wellness of surgical trainees from minority backgrounds. And they found that they had a higher career satisfaction, but there were higher rates of attrition. And they put it down to the likely negative factors which surrounded the environment in which they were working in. So I think that's absolutely right, is actually we do need to go back and show that it can be done, because clearly there are minority people who want to be surgeons and they clearly love it a lot. So we do need to go to find them and say, actually, this is possible. And look, these people are all here to support you, and we need to start enacting that.
There is a Royal College outreach programme, but it's actually not particularly well advertised. But that was commented on in the Kennedy report, and that's one of the actual actions that has been thought to be important. That actually, the people that go out actually are real people from all different diversities. It's no point in the president or a specific stereotype going out and saying you can be like me. You don't want to be like you. I want to be me in surgery. So that is something that they are trying to get going. I'm conscious we've only got 1 minute left. Has anyone got any last thoughts about this and the actions that we will take forward? I'm going to give Callum the last word because he is the future, and he is the one that we're doing this for, as well as ourselves. But we've already had that path of pain. We want to make sure no one else does.
I think I'll just highlight the importance of, if you want to help your department become more diverse, you need to go and speak to communities of people who are from diverse backgrounds. And if you are a diverse trainee or someone from minority background, then join the ACES network and we'll see what we can do.
And it leaves me really just to thank everybody. I think we are actually coming to a close, but for your contributions today and for your ongoing support for this network. We do really hope that with the Royal College changes and networks like the ACES, we can really make a difference.